To get started then, you've worked with all kinds of different people over the years, from comics to film. Which person or organisations has it been most fun to write with?
Well, personally, I've kind of got two favourite artists to work with.
Yeah,
With maybe three. Peter Gross and Mike Perkins are kind of my joint favourites in terms of comic work,
yeah,
because they're both incredibly versatile, incredibly imaginative, and they kind of lift the story up to a different level. Whenever I work with them, it seems to sort of force me to play my A game. And the third artist I've worked with twice and loved both times, Sonny Liu, Singaporean artist who did My Faith in Frankie with me, and then We Gifted. Organizations, it kind of doesn't come down to organizations in the end. It comes down to personal relationships. So, in comics and in prose, it's your editor.
yeah, true.
And it's whether that relationship works, really. And both at Marvel and at DC, I've had the good fortune to work with editors who've actually taught me a lot about storytelling. When I started out at DC, my first editor was Alisa Whitney, and my second was Shelley Bond, Shelley Roberg back then. And they're both passionate about story. They're both really, really intelligent and really engaged as editors. And in both of those cases, I got a lot out of those working relationships.
And I suppose as well, obviously, when you're working particularly with kind of illustrators, you're almost relying on them to bring your creation to life. I mean, do you find that it adds an extra dimension to your storytelling, in that you can actually see it kind of unraveling and actually, you see it in front of you rather than just keep it in your head?
Oh yeah, it's definitely a very, very different process than in prose.
Yeah.
Because you are relying on the artist to do an awful lot of the world building and an awful lot of the defining of the characters. And in many cases, your dialogue changes after you've seen the character design, because you suddenly you have a different sense of who that character is. And a good example there would be Guardian in Lucifer, the little fallen cherub. He didn't start out as this grotesque caricature who has a cigar in his mouth and talks like a New York taxi driver. It was just that once Peter had drawn him, I suddenly thought, he has the potential to be a kind of almost like a Shakespearean fool, completely undercutting the tragic and epic stuff that we're doing, bringing everything back down to basics. So the voice arose out of Peter's character design.
That's brilliant, yeah. And just coming on to the Girl with All the Gifts as well, because that's the book that put me onto you. I guess first off, how did you come up with the idea to turn the genre on its head and show an infected child almost as an innocent?
It actually it had a very, very strange genesis. It was because I was invited to contribute to an anthology. Every year, Charlene Harris and Tony Kellner do a themed anthology of supernatural stories, horror stories, and dark fantasy. And the theme is always something really banal and everyday and ordinary and reassuring. Like one year it was family holidays, one year it was home improvement. And they approached me a few years back, and the theme was going to be school days. So I said I would do a story for it, and then I sat there for literally months. I was doing other work, but no inspiration, nothing came, or at least nothing came that wasn't like a really, really bad rip-off of Harry Potter. And then one day I just woke up with this idea of a little girl sitting in a classroom writing an essay, and the essay was what I want to do when I grow up, which actually was the original working title of the story.
Yeah.
But the twist is that we're looking over her head. We can see what she can't, which is that she's already dead. She's never going to grow up. Obviously, that's not the way the story actually plays out, but that was the sort of the seed of it. And I wrote the short, submitted it. It did very, very well. It was well reviewed. It was nominated for an Edgar Allan Poe Award and also for the Derringer Short Mystery Fiction Award. But I had the sense that the story wasn't finished, that there was more to Melanie than that. And really, everything came from Melanie. to the ending where she gets to make the choice.
Yeah.
It's kind of like following through the logic of who she is and what she is. A lot of what I write is plot driven as much as it is character driven.
Yeah.
I think in the case of Go With All the Gifts, the characters are everything, and Melanie is the keystone of all the other characters. Yeah, the key to all the other characters.
Yeah, definitely. And so if you were trapped in a zombie apocalypse yourself, what would your survival strategy be?
I wouldn't have a survival strategy or hide under the table. But I suspect that I would be the guy right at the start of the movie who goes back to the house or goes back to the car for some trivial thing and gets eaten straight away. Yeah, I think my chances of surviving the zombie apocalypse are zero. Cat in hell to snowball in hell.
And in terms of kind of the universe of sort of zombie fiction as well, what's your favourite sort of film or book or other work about zombies?
Well, I love both Walking Dead and Land of the Dead.
Yeah.
For similar reasons, which is that they're both brilliant at showing the human inside the monster.
Yeah.
So the beat in the very first episode of Walking Dead, where the wife, the zombified wife, that keeps walking back to her own front door and staring at it hour after hour, and the husband is inside but he can't open up to her.
Yeah.
And the scene at the start of Land of the Dead, where the zombies are in the bandstand and they're sort of forlornly clutching their instruments, but they can't remember how to play them. Okay, so that sort of poignancy. But I also loved Warm Bodies, which I hadn't expected to love. You know, a zombie romantic comedy, rom-com.
Yeah.
But it worked brilliantly. I just thought it reinvented the genre. It did something that nobody else had ever done before, and it was charming and really entertaining.
I'll have to check that out. Yeah. And as for yourself, just in your writing, is there any deep thinking behind your choice to use your initials?
No. It was not deep thinking. It was marketing, really.
Yeah.
The idea was to just to put a little bit of a Chinese wall between this book and the previous books that I'd written.
Yeah.
So the buyers, especially big chain buyers, would look at it as a freestanding thing and not look at it as just the latest Mike Carey.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense.
So it was part of a strategy, but it almost did for us because the British proofs went out as being by M.J. Carey. My middle name is James.
Yeah.
And on the day that the British proofs were released, when it was too late to call them back, we realised that there was already an M.J. Carey, and she writes bondage porn.
Oh God.
So my Goodreads page was linking direct from The Girl With All the Gifts to these very, very explicit porno books. So all of the other proofs went out as being by M.R. Carey. The Americans and Australians are M.R. Carey, and of course the published version is M.R. Carey. So that's how it happened.
Well, that's quite the story, that. And and in terms of your writing, what's next for you? Can you tell us about anything that you're working on?
Yeah, well, I mean, a big part of my work this year has been the screenplay for Go With All the Gifts.
Yeah. Cool.
Which I was writing it at the same time as I was writing the novel, but I've been doing further drafts, and it's in a very, very good place at the moment. I've also been doing some TV work for Touch Paper, the company that did Being Human.
Yeah.
I've done a Bible for a series and a pilot, and I'm working on a second episode at the moment. And the next novel, I submitted it at the end of July, and is doing rewrites at the moment, which is it's a ghost story set in a prison.
Cool. Sounds brilliant. And I suppose in terms of your writing process, is there a typical day of writing for you? Do you have a routine?
I wish I had a routine. No, my days are chaos. I start early and finish late, but I would be lying if I said that I was doing productive work for all of that time. What happens is I'll work for an hour or a couple of hours, and I get distracted by something completely trivial. Very often I end up playing retro games as part of each day, like Sonic the Hedgehog and Flicky.
Oh,
Sega Mega Drive games from the 1980s. Or I'll sort of get distracted by the mess around me, and I'll start to tidy up, or just make myself a cup of coffee and end up staring out of the window. So I mean, I literally ricochet through the day. Work, distraction, work, distraction. I have really good days, and it seems like I get an awful lot done. And I have absolutely terrible days when I foodle around and I look, at the end of the day I've done like 500 words or something. And I used to feel desperately ashamed at the end of a day like that. You know, like I hadn't done enough to justify my place in the space I was taking up in the world.
Yeah.
But I've slowly come around to the conclusion that you need to have that kind of day so that you can have the other kind of day.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So that when my mind is switching off, it's switching off. It is not really switching off. It's diverting subroutine to think about some story problem, and then when I come back out of it, I'm galvanized and I'll be able to work.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And do you ever find that sort of developed the stories further in your head without even realizing it on those days?
Yes. Yeah, you come out of, you've been playing Sonic for an hour and a half, you come out of it and suddenly the problem is solved without you having sort of particularly to think about it.
Yeah.
It's amazing the way the mind works. It really does subdivide almost infinitely, and there are bits of your mind that are doing thinking that you're not aware of all the time.
Cool. And in terms of, because we're a book blog, we always ask the same question of everyone. So what was the last book that you read, and what did you think of it?
The last book I read was Ancillary Justice by Anne Leckie, the winner of this year's Arthur C. Clarke Award.
Cool.
And I loved it. I really loved it. Brilliant sort of use of like classic science fiction tropes. In some ways, it was a very traditional sci-fi novel about galactic empires and the clash of cultures.
Yeah.
But doing some lovely and original things with the idea of artificial intelligence, and ultimately exploring the nature of human identity. I found it really moving and really just a totally compelling read.